Alright, so today I'm going to be making a stencil for this coffin little thing that I got from Michael's. And so it's basically, I'll try and put a little screenshot of it. Basically, it's a piece of like plain wood that you can do whatever you want with it, and it's shaped like a coffin. So I thought it was the perfect little shape for a welcome sign for our front door. So here all I did to create these is I just clicked over here to make a text box, and then I just typed in the letters and I did a new line for each letter. Some of this new design space I like, and some of it I don't really like, but anyways, so that's basically how I did the text box. That's not the font I'm going to use, so I'm going to get rid of it. The three font choices that I ended up deciding on is this BFC Spooky Ghost. I thought that was kind of cute. This one, it looks like you need Cricut access to use it, so apologies. This one is called Gothic 821. And now I can't find where it is. Gothic. Let's see. This is also a Cricut Access font, so apologies. And then this is called Trade Gothic Display. This one actually does not look like you need Cricut Design Space for it. So this could be your best option if you don't have Cricut Design Space. Alright, I can't decide which one I want. This one I like because it just has like a little more character to it, but I like these also because they're a little more plain. I think I'm going to go with this one. I'm just going to stick with the theme, so I'm just going to get rid of these. So now we're basically done. All I have to do is size this. So I need to measure my coffin. So the coffin is about, it sounds so weird that I'm saying like the coffin when I'm talking about my craft, but so it's about 40 inches. So I think what I'm going to do is I want this to be, so apparently to unlock this also now, so I'm digressing a little bit. So previously there used to be a little lock here, but now they don't have that feature here. But it's up here. So the reason I like to unlock it is because right now I can only stretch it one way, and it's going to keep the proportions, which is good if you want to do that. But if you click on it, click this little unlock guy over here, so you can see it says lock proportions. So if I unlock it, it basically unlocks the proportions. So now I can pretty much stretch it however I want. So for this, I want it to be about, I wish I could hide this little ribbon up here. I don't know how to do that. I want it to be about 30 inches long. So I'm just stretching it. I think I'm going to stretch this out just a little bit more, just to make the letters a little more readable. Alright, so now for the stencil portion of this, I'm going to come over here to shapes, and I'm going to create just a square. So again, I'm going to unlock the proportions, so now I can pretty much stretch it however I want. And now I'm just going to basically place this box over the entirety of the word, so you can see that it's covering the word, and I'll send this to the back so you can just see what it's going to look like, so you can kind of see where we're going with this, how we're going to create the stencil. So I have now my words my word here. I have the little square behind it. Now what I'm going to do is click and drag. So both of my layers here are selected. You can also do this by just clicking and holding shift and clicking both of the layers. That will work as well. So you can see when nothing's selected, the slice button is not lit up, but when I select both of these layers, the slice button lights up. So a couple of things and questions I've gotten in the past is, well, my slice light isn't lighting up. The reason for that is it could be because you're trying to select more than 2 items. So I'll show you what I mean. Like if I have this little text box here, I'm just using this as like a reference. So let's say I try to select all of this. Slice is not going to light up because you can only slice 2 things at a time. So that's just a little tip. All right, so now that our slice button is lit up, we're just going to click slice. And now we can pull away our letters and we are left with our nice little stencil here. I wanted to make sure that I did have plenty of room around the letters just for paint that might, bleed or whatever. But that is basically it. So you can see that now this stencil is going to be quite large. So if I try to go and make it, it is going to basically force me to make it without a mat. So I haven't used the stencil film without a mat, so I'm going to give it a try and see if it works. But if not, and if you don't have the Cricut Maker 3, you don't have smart materials, there's a little trick that you can do. So basically all I'm going to do is right now this stencil is basically as it is. There's not a whole lot that I can do with it as far as like ungrouping, getting the letters, how I want them. So a little hack is you can come over here to shapes, make a square. Again, I'm going to unlock the proportions. And I'm going to just make this a different color just to make it easy just to like see what I'm doing. So I'm going to make this square basically the same shape, and I'm going to basically make 2 pieces of this stencil. So again, I'm basically going to select, make this a little bit more exact. Hold on, I'm just zooming in so I can see. Make sure it covers everything. All right, so now I'm going to select everything and I'm going to do this same little slice process. So now you can see that my stencil has basically been cut in half. So now when I go to make it, I have my option to either do it without a mat or on a mat. So for this, I will do on a mat. I have my 12 by 24 mat, so that's the mat I'm going to use. Click continue. So you can see now I have my 2 pieces of stencil here that will just line up perfectly. So another way you could have done this as well is you could just do your text. Actually, you could do this a couple different ways. You can do 2 groups of text. You can do one and then ungroup it and then weld the 2 pieces and do the same kind of like stencil process. Whatever you want. There's different ways to do these large stencils. So now that I have my 2 little stencils here, I'm gonna do on the mat. Hit continue. It's gonna find my machine. So I'm going to be using the blue Oracle, I think it's what is it? 813 stencil film. So for this, I found that the vinyl setting works fine. There's also a stencil vinyl setting as well, but I feel like the vinyl setting works good for this. So that is my cut setting. So I will switch you over to the camera to show you how we're going to make it. Alright, so the stencil film I'm going to be using for this, like I said, is the Oracle 813. I have the actual film behind it, but I wasn't sure if this would focus. So this is the film I'm using. You can also use any removable vinyl that you have. You do not have to use stencil film. Sometimes this stencil film can be a little temperamental. Sorry, my camera is like not focusing right now, but sometimes this can be temperamental because it does bubble, but if it does bubble, it's still usable. And if it happens when I cut, I'll show you exactly what I mean. But like I said, I'm going to be using my this is a 12 by 24 mat. So I'm just going to put my film onto my mat and we can get to cutting. Alright, so I have my stencil film on my mat and I'm just going to squeegee it on there. Alright, and so I don't know if you could see, but my Cricut light is blinking, so I'm going to load my mat. And then once the little play button starts to blink, I will start to cut. And just a reminder, I'm cutting this on the regular vinyl setting. I'm not using a stencil vinyl setting. You can, but I've just found that vinyl for this stencil film works fine. If you are cutting super intricate, then I would maybe play around with the washi tape setting. But for big letters like this, the vinyl setting should be fine. And we can cut. So again, this is our first half of our stencil, and then the second half of our stencil will cut when this end is finished. Alright, so I'm going to unload my mat just by, again, pushing these little blinking arrow buttons. So let's see if you can actually see any cuts on this. It's too bright in here, but I promise it cut. And so to get this off the mat without it curling, especially the stencil film, if it curls too much, it gets kind of difficult to work with. I flip the mat over and just kind of peel, you can't really see from that angle, just kind of peel the mat from the vinyl, but just be careful you don't want to snap your mat in half. I've done that, and I've had people in the comments say, you told me to do this and my mat snaps. So just be gentle. And your vinyl still may curl a little bit, which is fine, but it just prevents it from getting super tight. Alright, so now I'm going to put the vinyl on for the second half of our stencil. Alright, so we have the second half of our stencil cut. So again, just going to take this off the mat. Alright, so now I have my two stencils here, so now we're just going to weed away, so then we're going to be left with our stencil. So basically all we're going to do here, so I've already trimmed these, so I'm going to take my weeding tool here. I feel like my camera is not focusing today for some reason. And so like I said, I've already trimmed these, and so I'm just going to use my weeding tool and just pick up this little border that's around it, just because I don't need it. I swear it never fails. Anytime I start to film, trash truck goes by. Like, I don't understand. Alright, so you can kind of see our letters here. So again, this is the bottom half of the stencil. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to weed away, or basically take out the actual letters here. So we'll be left with the negative space, and that's where we'll actually put our paint. And again, you can, like, you know, if you, there are other ways to make stencils. Basically, you could just cut out this word, but I like to have kind of the perfect border around it. It just helps kind of line everything up, especially since I have two halves here, so it just makes it a little bit easier. So we have our second half of our stencil, so I'm just going to do that with this, and then we'll be ready to paint. Alright, so now you can see we have the two halves of our stencils, so now it's time to get that coffin and put it on the table, and we can start to paint. So as you can see, we have this little coffin guy here. I spray painted it black, and I'll show you the spray paint I used. I'll show you the spray paint I used, and then I also painted the trim white with just some acrylic paint, and that's going to be the same paint that we're actually going to paint the font. So let me grab those and we'll start putting on our stencil. So like I said, this is the black paint I used. It is the Color Shot that's also now sold at Michael's, and I just love it. This is called Blackout, and it's a matte finish. They also have spray paints in like satin and glossy. And then for the font, and also I use it for the trim as well, I just use this Artist Loft white acrylic paint. Okay, so my vision, and I don't think it's going to be possible to get all this in one shot, but my vision is to just have it start at the top, I mean, obviously, and then it'll be like this. I just thought that would be so cute. So to do this, I need to grab my transfer tape. So I'm using my favorite Expressions vinyl paper transfer tape. This I got from Auntie Tay, but you can get it from other places as well. This is honestly my favorite transfer tape. It's the only one that I really have like good luck with. So this is what I'm going to be using, but you can use whatever transfer tape that you have. So for this, it's like so jacked up, though I need to get like a clean piece. So I'm just going to basically pull a piece, and I'm wondering if, I know this isn't exactly the same size, but I wonder if it will do the trick. I'm going to try, so I don't have to do a bunch this way. I'm going to try it this way. I think it should work okay. So I'm just going to stretch it over. I'm just trimming this here. Honestly, I probably could try and stretch it over both of the stencils we have, but I think I'll have a better chance of lining them up when one is on, and then I can line up the other one. So I'm just going to use my little squeegee and just scrape the transfer tape on the stencil. And then I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to just kind of like peel the backing off of the stencil. So we will be left with our stencil on our transfer tape. Alright, so I have to move the camera a little bit so I can like make sure this is perfect, since this is actually going to go on my front door. Well, it doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but you know. So I think, let's see. I'm putting the bottom half on so I can kind of see where I want this to end. It is so difficult to do this with like a camera in the way, but I'm gonna try. the center. So this is 7.5. All right, so I think I have this where I want it, straight as possible. All right, so I kind of just like pushed it down in the center. Now I'm gonna take my squeegee and just work my way out. All right, so now I can peel off the transfer tape. So unfortunately, because this is like see-through, you're not gonna be able to see where the transfer tape is, but I'll give you a close-up once this is all done. Oh, actually you can see it you can kind of see it there. So the one thing with this transfer tape is it does tend to bubble. So I'm going to take my squeegee and I'm just going to make sure that I can get rid of any bubbles that is near like where we're going to be painting. I don't really care if there's bubbles out here. I'm just more concerned about near the actual letters themselves. That's where you can get bleeding. So to make sure I don't have any bleeding, I'm just going to really smooth down the stencil near the letters. I don't really care if there's bubbles like out here, but if it's near where we're going to be painting, that's where you can get bleeding. Alright, so now I'm just going to do that exact same thing with this bottom half of the stencil and try and get it as lined up as possible. So again, just taking my transfer tape, stretching it over. Again, you can use whatever transfer tape you have handy. This is just what I personally like. I feel like it's like the easiest to work with. So smooth over. It doesn't have to look perfect. And peel the backing away. So we're just going to be left with our stencil. So now is going to be where we really want to make sure it's lined up perfectly, or you know, close to it, because we want the spacing to all be similar. And I don't want to overlap the stencil, so I think that should actually be decent. So my camera cut off, so I don't know where this left off, but I have the second half of the stencil on. I just have to squeegee it and remove the transfer tape, and then we will be good to go. So just squeegee that on there. And we can remove the transfer tape. All right, so again, I'm just going to squeegee this and make sure there's no air bubbles near where we're going to be painting. All right, so to paint this, I'm going to be using this Artist Loft acrylic paint as I mentioned, and then I'm just going to be using a foam brush. I feel like it's going to work nicely with this wood type. So, all right, so I zoomed you in a little bit, and so where's my, so this E, I can already tell it's going to just give me a problem. So I'm really trying to smooth out this bubble as best as I can, or at least get it away from where I'm going to be painting. So I'm just taking my squeegee and I'm just really like forcing it away. It just really wants to be there for some reason. Okay, should be all right for now. So like I said, I'm just going to use this acrylic paint. I'm going to use this foam brush. And so one of the tricks I think is I want to go like with the grain of the wood so I don't get any snags. Also with letters that have these little like points like a W, I want to go like with the point. I don't want to like go against it too much because then that can cause it to like peel. So just being like kind of gentle. Last tip is I'm going to use like the faintest coat of paint to start off with, and then we can always add more. If you go in with like a big glob of paint, it's just not going to be a good time. That's when you're really prone to bleeding. So I'm just, see, that's even probably more than I wanted, honestly. So I'm just going with the grain of the wood, just trying to be careful around the edges. And like I said, we're going to do multiple coats of paint here, so it's a little bit tedious of a process if you really want to avoid bleeding, but I think it's worth it. And see, this is why we want this border around it, because if not, we would just be like, there'd be paint all over the place. All right, so now let's do our E. Again, light coat with the grain. And then I'm just going to be as careful as I can here. We can always touch it up later. So we're going to go in for the L. And I'm just kind of blotting off that excess paint. Oh my god, I haven't done it. Dang it. I haven't done a stencil in so long. Alright, so we have our first couple of letters. So now let's go down to our C. Just blotting off some excess paint. Being careful with that point there, so I'm just kind of changing the direction of my paint strokes. Some people like to blot, some people like to, you know, paint however they want to paint. This is the way I like to do it, so there's no right or wrong necessarily. I think the main key is just light coats of paint to start with, and then you can add more and more as needed. Alright, so we have our first coat of paint on, so now I'm just going to go back for a second coat, again just starting at the top, trying not to spill paint all over my carpet. Alright, again just kind of starting out light, but now we can go in with a little more now that we have our base. So another trick is we're going to peel this when it is still damp, so we get nice clean lines. If you let it dry for too long, the paint can tend to, oh, I just totally skipped over the L, whoops. The paint can tend to peel, so we want to peel it when it's still relatively like damp, not when it's like sopping wet obviously, but just a little bit damp. So now you can see that the paint's a little more opaque. It's not so see-through, but I think we'll probably go back with one more coat after this. Alright, so now we're going to go back for another coat. So since this is probably going to be close to like my final coat, I want to make sure I get all of the strokes going in like the same direction, just so it doesn't look so messy. So I'm just going to make sure nice, clean strokes, or whatever look you're going for. If you want it a little more like rustic, then that's fine. So going back to this E. Alright, so I ended up doing about 4 coats on this. So now, while it's still a little bit damp, we are going to peel away our stencil. So I'm going to start with this bottom one because it is overlapping this here. So hopefully it turns out. So I think I'm going to start from the bottom and peel, or actually I'll start from the top. Alright, so I'm just peeling a corner. I'm just going to be gentle, and if anything is like left behind, I'm just going to leave it and I'll come back for it with my weeding tool. Looking good. So I had a little bleeding on the M, but nothing too bad. So now I'm gonna do the top one. Oh my gosh, so cute. Oh my god. All right, so now I'm just gonna go back with my weeding tool and get the middle of this O. That's pretty much the only middle letter that I need to do anything with. So you can see I had like a tiny little bleed there and a tiny little bleed there, which honestly I expected. So I'm just taking a Q-tip and I'm just going to gently try and clean it up a little bit. Or if you don't care about the bleed, then honestly just leave it. I could probably get away with it since this is like a Halloween thing, but I'm gonna try. I actually ended up just taking the cotton off of this to make it a little sharper. And I'm just shout. I'm just gonna smudge it a little bit, and then worst case scenario, if I'm still not happy with it, I can just go in with some black paint and no one will know. Alright, so I cleaned that up a little bit. So how cute did this turn out? I'm so happy with it. I'll give you a little zoomed in shot action. turned out so good. I'm so happy with how this turned out. Like I said, I have not done a stencil in a long time, so I'm really happy with how this turned out. It's so cute. I know it's a little plain, but I'll show you the final product when I put my like whole door together, because I'm going to put this at the front door and I got all this other stuff. So I will put a little image right here to show you the final product, because I think it turned out so cute. And that is basically it. So I hope you enjoyed this stencil tutorial. Let me know what else you guys want to see in the comments below, and I will see you next time. Happy crafting!